Hi there, welcome to my week two overview video in which I give you a tour of our assignments and kind of talk about them and give you some helpful advice. So let's just dive right in. Um, Always have an impossible time trying to find my um, so I set this to open on one of my recent blog posts, which if I keep reusing this video won't be so recent anymore. But I did one on my childhood home, which I'm pretty proud of and pretty excited about. But it just allowed me to open this up more quickly because I have so many um, things open, and I also have the course open over on my right monitor. So um, week two. Um, we have overview, we have learning materials, we have two discussions, just like last week, one on readings and concepts, and one that is a peer review based on your writing practice. You turn in the writing practice before the discussion board in which you peer review it, and then you have another writing practice after that, and then you have a journal entry, which pretty much looks like you're going to have every week. So let's hit it. All right, this week is about character and point of view, which is why, along with this video, I did a video on character, point of view, and dialogue. And so, um, it kind of takes you through terms and phrases, concepts of point of view, techniques for character development, part of which is dialogue, right? So, boom. All right, learning materials. Two short stories. The famous Hills Like White Elephants by Ernest Hemingway, and Omakase, which I think is how you say it, um, by, and I'm not sure, what Weike, Wang. Um, I apologize to any Asian students in the audience, and you could help me if you know how to pronounce these things. Even if you're not Asian, you might know how to pronounce them. I guess I could have used the Google before I started the video to help me pronounce things. I don't want to be seem like a stupid white guy, but you know, I didn't. So there we go. Okay. One of the things that I love about this class is that there's no textbook and it's giving you open resource materials that are available on the internet and embedding them in the class so that you don't have to buy anything. Unfortunately, if you have looked at the New Yorker, ultimately you're not going to be able to look at all the, like, there's another New Yorker story in week three, I noticed. You're not going to be able to keep looking at them without subscribing. So here's what I'm going to do for you. I subscribed and then I made a copy of the story and put it in a PDF document. I even printed it because I like to read paper because I spend so much time looking at screens. Um, and with black and white and everything, it was only about 10 pages. So I recommend that. So here are PDF links. They go directly to my Google Drive, like this, and then you can download them, or you could just read it through the viewer here. I even preserved the visual. Um, Omakase is a really great character study story. They're both very character-driven stories, and they both really relate to the one of the practice assignments in which you write dialogue and for characters that both have secrets, but you don't tell the reader what the secret is. And this is the famous premise of Hills Like White Elephants, right? It's we'll talk about it in the discussion. I don't really want to give away what the secret is, but it's pretty obvious. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Um, the secrets of Omakase, and what's going on in that story and the character goals and stakes are a little different. And It's a really, really great story. I had not read it until I got into the redesign of this course. And so I just finished it, which will not be true if I keep using this video. And I really loved it. I really, really loved it. One of the things, so Hills Like Wet Elephants is just a really great study of dialogue. It's basically just dialogue. It sets a little bit of scene. I'm not even sure if you know the names of the characters. I think it's just the man and the woman. Let's look. Um, yeah, the man said it's been a while since I read it. Yeah, it's just the man and the woman. So they don't even have names. Um, and there's a little setting, but mostly it's dialogue. And it's a very, very short story. Um, Omakase is a little bit longer, and you have um, you have again um, no character names. Um, so it's kind of funny. In a week where we want you to think about character, we give you two stories with no character names, but character definition that comes out through situation and dialogue. And unlike the dialogue heavy driven Hills Like White Elephants, Omakase has a scene where they go into the sushi restaurant to have omakase. And if I am butchering how that's pronounced, I'm gonna just a second. I'm gonna solve my problem. Hold on. Omakase. I was close. Omakase. Um, so you have a scene. This man and this woman, they're in a relationship. They've recently moved in together. They go into this restaurant to have omakase, which is a chef-driven multiple course sushi dinner, in which, because omakase literally means, um, surprise me. It's up to you. Um, and that's a metaphor obviously, for their relationship, right? And so, as the narrator tells you the story about these people, so this is in third person, referring to the man and the woman, not in the first person. Um, there's a lot of the background, right? So, this was a really good study in kind of a blend of when you show readers something, which often happens in the scene and in dialogue. And the ending, which I don't want to spoil, is very much that. It's showing you something and then leaving you, the reader, to decide what you think about it. One of the characters is going to give you a reaction to what happens. But really, we're supposed to be left thinking about how we feel about what happened, and our opinion of that and what that means for the relationship of these two people. Um, but along the way, because pretty much from the beginning, they're going out for sushi. They find this restaurant, they go in. You get background on her parents, on meeting the guy, on her fears that he's only dating her because she's Chinese, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's very important that she's Chinese. Um, to the story and the ending, as you will see when you read it, if you have not read it already. So it's really well done, but in kind of a modern style. And this was also true of last week's of the Amy Bender story. No quotation marks, right? This style of creating a narrative that is all a narrative, and it doesn't have those conventions of the quotation marks around who's speaking. But you do have character tags, and you should pay attention to character tags in both of the stories, right? Something like the man asked, though redundant of the sentence, why do you say impossible? The man asked. Obviously, it's a question, but we need a tag so that we know it was the man that asked it, and ultimately have two other characters in the restaurant. Um, so, it's redundant, but you wouldn't say, why do you say impossible? The man said. I mean, you could, but I mean, he asked it. So that one's okay. But for the most part, you just want to use said, because they just generally become invisible. Um, you want to be careful of what's called said bookisms, in which, you say the man replied angrily. It's usually an adverb that is added on, but sometimes it's taking um, a pseudonym, for the not a pseudonym, but a synonym. Oh my gosh, for said. Now sometimes that works, like asked, like replied. I see here, like shouted. Probably we need something like that. Sometimes, but things like retorted or asserted or there's lots of ones that don't always work and need to be used very, very sparingly, if at all, right? Generally just said. And when two people are talking, you don't have to tag every bit of dialogue, right? Because it's just back and forth between two people. So if you don't have any other people, you don't have, so look at that in Hills Like White Elephants, because we know who's talking and there's only two people. So we don't have to tag every bit of dialogue, right? So we have, I believe, two lectures that follow this. One on the inner workings of characters, which is really good, gets you into flat and round characters. And then point of view, which I address a little in my other video, but this gets into it in more depth. But again, popular, the most commonly used points of view are first person and third person limited. Um, and I recommend naming your characters. It's more difficult to pull off a story with the man and the woman than if you name your characters, right? So I recommend naming your characters. All right, discussion board number one asks you to write about a character from one of these stories. Um, and what makes this character a round character versus a flat character. And I will tell you right now that I feel that Omakase is the better choice for round characters than Hills Like White Elephants. Because though the characters are talking about something that they don't say out loud as to what it is, I think their characters are rather flat. Now, if you want to write about flat characters, you could go there. Or if you want to argue with me for why those characters are more round than they're flat, because I am not the like I don't pronounce them flat, and then you must accept what I have said. You can disagree. That is why these classes exist. It's called critical thinking. It's good. But again, use specific lines from the story to illustrate your points, which means probably more than one specific line from the story to illustrate your points. And I recommend that you put quotation marks around the material that you quote from the stories. And possibly, in the case of Omakase, the page on which it appears, if you were to print out that, or even in the PDF file, would be helpful. Um, and then you only have to respond to one classmate post, but as with each week, you will be encouraged to respond in my extra items, for which you may earn bonus points. I mean, I shouldn't say may. You'll always earn bonus points if you meet the requirement for the assignment and write in my extra items. How much bonus I award will change week to week based on how much extra stuff I post, how much extra stuff you reply to, and my eye at not inflating grades too much. But there will be a week where I, say I'm going to give a big award, or there might be a week where I say writing a response in one of my extra posts is required, and it's worth this many points out of the points in the assignment. Um, so follow these, but word to the wise, if you write in my extra posts, it doesn't count as a peer response or an initial post. So those are the requirements. You have to meet those. You have to write to one of your peers in response to their initial post, not in response to something they write in my extra post. So this is where you're graded. Your initial post, 10 points. Your response to them on their initial post, 5 points. Then extra points, possibly for, not possibly, extra points for writing in my items. And I put them in both discussions, as you'll see. And you don't have to respond to all of them. I'm going to post way more than you could possibly respond to. I mean, you could respond to them all, but I mean, they're not required anyway. So you just do as you will. First practice, is dialogue in which characters have a secret. That's your first option. They both have a secret, but you can't name what the secret is. This is essentially just assigning you to write a story like Hills Like White Elephants. Though I think in Omakase, there's secrets being held by both characters. Um, but, you know, you tell me whether you agree with me. The second option is a little more, it's a little different. Um, it's an observation assignment, and it requires you to go out in public and observe people and write down details and speculate about them. This actually literally happened last night with me and my wife. I'm sure you have done this kind of thing, but may not have written out all the details. And of course, we did not write out all the details. But my wife leaned over when we were at dinner and whispered to me that the two men in the booth behind us, she thought were on a first date and that they had met, on a dating website or whatever and a dating app. And one of them had extreme body odor, so much so that she could smell it a booth away. Um, and of course, that's a thing in Portland, which is near where we live. Um, I literally said in my other video that you wouldn't transcribe dialogue word for word from reality because it wouldn't necessarily work in fiction. Not that it wouldn't work in fiction, but it might not work in fiction. And it wouldn't work as well as dialogue you're composing as a fictional device. But this assignment does not ask you to do that. And that would be harder to do, peeping at people, right? But it's kind of interesting. Like I recommend doing this anyway. It's important to observe, people and learn from them. It'll help you to differentiate your characters in terms of how they're different. Um, if you have more than one character, which I recommend also. So obviously you write the practice and then you post the practice in the other discussion. Um, and trigger warning, if you write about something upsetting, right? So, definitely include a trigger warning if you write about something that could be triggering for people. But it is difficult to predict what might be triggering for people, right? So obvious things like explicit violence, rape, incest, animal cruelty, things that could be part of someone's trauma that happened to them is, understandably easy to figure out trigger warning, right? But this woman at an art fair yesterday was looking at one of my daughter's collages, and she was like, "Is that Jackie?" And my daughter thought she meant Jackie Kennedy, and she said no, and the woman said, "Well, it looks like Jackie Kennedy, and I'm triggered," and walked away. Like, how could that have been predicted, right? It's like really bizarre, right? So if you got Jackie Kennedy in your story, I don't think you need a trigger warning, even though that could potentially trigger someone like a woman at the art fair, right? It isn't, um, um, it is kind of cool if you let us know which of the two options you did. Um, that's why it asks you right about the challenges, so that we, don't have to guess at which of the two. But it should be pretty obvious, right? Again, initial post, peer post, and extra posts, same thing as I said before. Um, in terms of, you must write a peer response to somebody else's initial post. Just on this, I did a bunch of responses to people's initial posts in last week's discussion and gave advice. I was trying to follow my own advice of positive things and then at least one thing to think about. Every suggestion that I make is just something for you to think about. It's not, you should do this. Now, sometimes I'll make a strong case for if you're like telling more than showing and say, I think you really should consider setting that scene and showing us rather than telling us what happened. Um, but every suggestion I make is a suggestion. It's stuff for you to think about. And sometimes I'll give you multiple things to think about. Well, what if you did this? What if you did this? What if you did this? What if the curtains were black instead of red? What if, this and this? Is it under, like a bunch of stuff, right? Um, and that's usually if I have a lot of those suggestions, it's because you inspired me. Um, but I think with everybody's writing, I said something really positive, multiple positive things. And yeah, there was tons of good writing, and this will be true in every semester. So even if this isn't the one in which I made the video and I'm reusing it, this will still be true here. The important thing is that no matter how many I respond to, I'm not going to be able to respond to everybody. So if you didn't get a response, I try to be mindful to give you one in a future week. But it's you know unless the class is very small, which could be true in the future. If the class is at cap or close to the cap size, it's very difficult to write back to everybody. All right. So then you have a second practice assignment that has kind of a worksheet to fill out. And the person that created it is kind of self-conscious about that, as if um, it's like painting by numbers. But this is not a bad thing to do to really get a handle on things about your character and to think specifically about character things. So it's a really cool thing. So I recommend it. Obviously, I mean it's required. Um, and then there's always a journal, right? And so, how are you feeling about your characters? Do you feel like you created a complex character? Do you have a plan to continue developing these characters? Um, what did you find was useful in helping you in this particular unit? And just brainstorming, share things with me. Pretty much anything you want, anything goes. Pretty much. Um, you know, um, Again, with the grading, I do kind of look at the prompts. I expect to give very high grades in creative writing because I'm not going to grade your writing in terms of its quality, right? But I am just going to grade whether you met the requirements that were set out in the assignments, right? So if you write something that really doesn't address any of this stuff in the prompt, I might not give that all the points, right? But if you at least, you know, treat it like what it is, even though I said pretty much anything goes in terms of what you write, then you're likely to get all the points, right? So, quick look ahead to week 3. You're going to have your short story draft due at the end of week 3, which is next week. And again, you're going to have the 2 discussions and practice and the journal. And it's going to be focused on plot um, and scenes. Um, and this is very important because often young writers or new writers, they don't really think in scenes. And, if you watch a movie, you watch a TV show, most novels, short story, there's a scene. That's why I was talking about omakase, excuse me. Um, there's a scene, in the restaurant, and we back up and learn things about the characters and their background, but we're still in that scene. Hills Like Wet Elephants is all the scene. It's just one scene. Um, so very important to think about that as you're rolling forward. We'll get into that in more depth next week. And that's what I got for you. It looks like close to half an hour is about my norm. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. Anyway, see you around. Thanks for listening.